Our third speaker from the panel tonight believes he has performed over 50 marriages. He feels though his average dropped when he briefly moved to Ottawa. Father James was a bit worried that his topic might be a bit too dry for tonight. He has that type of personality, however, that can inject levity into practically any situation. For example, when I asked Father James where he performed his first marriage ceremony, he was quick to tell me that the proper term is officially witnessed. I thought he was just throwing his canon law terminology at me. But then he went on to explain that he had technically married his sister and his cousin. So you can see why the proper terminology should be officially witnessed. Our priests, as you know, have been playing musical churches instead of musical chairs. As I mentioned earlier, Father Jerome had officially witnessed his first wedding at the church where Father Nathan is now. And ironically, Father James officially witnessed his first wedding at St. Peter's, where Father Jerome is now. I'm having a hard time keeping up with all of you. And of course, Father James is now at St. Albert the Great, where Father Kevin and Father Jerome used to be. Hi. Please help me welcome, with his presentation called Till Death Do Us Part, Father James.
I have to apologize to one of those cousins that I've married because I actually married one of my cousins when I was a deacon. And that was in St. Michael's, not in St. Peter's. So I was for my first wedding in St. Michael's as well. Sorry, my cousin. Now, when Catholics talk about marriage, we're talking about an institution that began really from the beginning of time. If you think about it, God himself brought together Adam and Eve. And the institution has been handed on from society to society and from age to age, even down to our present day. And because of this history, you can say that God himself started marriage. And thus, there are things that are essential to marriage that God himself wrote upon it. This is what's called the natural law, the law of God that we see written on the world around us. And we see God imprinted on this institution of marriage that goes back to creation itself. Throughout the ages, theologians have pondered this law of God in this natural world. Most recently, we had the Vatican Council #2, where a section on the pastoral constitution, the church in the modern world, devoted a chapter to the sacrament of marriage, which leads to my specialty, canon law. And they took one of that passage, paragraph 40, and from Gaudium et Spes, and encapsulated into this canon, which I think is one of the more poetic canons in all of the book. And it goes like this. The matrimonial covenant, by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole life, which is ordered by its nature to the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of children, has been raised by Christ the Lord to the dignity of a sacrament between the baptized. Now, the next canon is far less poetic, but it defines two essential properties that are a part of marriage. The essential properties of marriage, it says, are unity and indissolubility. In many ways, these two canons try to articulate the imprint of God in marriage that we have in our modern age. My professor once said that to tease out this passage, is a good way to spend a wedding homily. So I don't know if that's how you spent 15 minutes with your brother, Father Nathan, but the part that I want to focus on tonight is what I quoted, that marriage is a partnership of the whole life. In the next canon that I quoted, it underlines that point a second time, that lifelong partnership is protected, that it cannot be dissolved by powers from without the marriage or from within. God himself protects it. And we see this truth in the wedding rite itself. During the vows, the partners say to each other several things, and the last line being, "all the days of my life." And like the canons, it is reinforced by the priest immediately after, saying, "What God has joined, humans must not divide." Now, I said that this definition is for our modern world, but the Second Vatican Council happened in the 1960s, and things have changed since the 1960s, or perhaps more accurately, the fruits of the 1960s have finally bore fruit in our age today. And of those changes, there is a prevalence of divorce. Father Nathan quoted some stats talking about that divorce. But in our culture today, there are many more divorces, and it's become part of the mentality of the culture that divorce is an option. Now, I must be careful to say here that not all marriages can be preserved. There are cases of domestic violence, or where staying together can be harmful to a spouse or to the children. In these cases, the protection of persons is very important. And we support women's shelters, for example, when we do the Together in Action campaign starting in a few weeks in Lent. But typically, in those marriages, there is something that's flawed from the very beginning. Consent, which is at the very heart of the marriage, is broken from the start. The divorce culture that we have today, though, goes much further. Irreconcilable differences is the most common ground. Promising marriage to one another until there are irreconcilable differences is far different than till death do us part. This mentality, unfortunately, has crept into our society's understanding of marriage. And this erodes something that's very important, the very imprint of God on what marriage is, on this most wonderful human institution. I would like to close with a partial reflection on why indissolubility, or a lifelong union, is an integral part and an essential part of marriage. You might think at first that it's for the sake of children. They need a stable home in which they will be raised. But children, though they are a great gift from God, are not essential to marriage. Being open to children is, but children themselves aren't. There are married couples who enjoy wonderful marriages that never have children. And so, despite this good of raising children, there is something more fundamental to indissolubility than to raise children. And I would say that quality goes back to the very author himself, God, who created the institution. Because marriage, by its very nature, reflects God. And God most profoundly, as he is eternal. In a lifelong union, it really, we think of eternal life as being forever tomorrows. But more accurately, eternity is an ever-present now. And so the moment that we share now, and the moment we share now in this moment, is always present to God. And that is a more accurate way of describing eternity. And so marriage reflects God because that ever-present now is lived in their marriage. They choose to make this now that they share together to mean forever. And that sacramentalizes God.